I'm Luke Kerfuffle, and in the once upon a time, there was a land like purple cliffs, a frozen waste watery basin, a metal desert. But this theater was built upon that, and it grew. Not everyone liked the change. Some people left. Of course, that was in the days of the black and white. Creating art is an extremely difficult journey to embark on. You'll feel inspired, you'll feel burnt out, you'll push yourself to become more than you ever thought you could be, with the goal of creating something that captures the essence of you, your power. And then you share that with the world. And from that point on, you have zero control. 5 people might see it, thousands might see it, but there's nothing you can do to ensure that. And if and when they do, you have no idea how they'll interpret it, how it'll shape them. When Toby Fox began to work on Undertale, he never could have imagined what it would become. A cultural phenomenon, a landscape-defining event. Undertale took the world by storm in a way which is exceedingly rare. It changed hundreds of lives, found a home in thousands of hearts, and people rightfully began to postulate that Undertale was one of the greatest games ever made. Imagine following that up. Deltarune is, in the very definition of the phrase, a passion project, an idea which came to Fox almost divinely in a fever dream, one which he strived to make ever since. It was always the project he wanted to create, and he was working on it well before Undertale, but he switched to the latter when he quickly learned just how complex and difficult it would be to bring his vision for Deltarune to light. But now, thanks to Undertale, he has the means. He has the budget and the time and the team, and he can make Deltarune into everything he wanted it to be. Thanks to Undertale. This is the first room we see in all of Deltarune. It's Chris and Asriel's bedroom. On Asriel's side, the shelves are full of trophies, a testament to his achievements. On Chris's side, the shelves are barren. There is no sign that anyone even uses this side of the room, aside from the birdcage and an ominous bloodstain nearby. But in the dark world, this is Chris's room. It's Asriel's side, just flipped. Now they have the accolades, they have the achievements, and the rest of the room falls into darkness. The Dark World tells us a lot about Deltarune's connections to Undertale, especially in regards to its characters. Chris, Susie, Noelle, and Birdly are all characters we don't see in Undertale, but Toriel and Undyne are, and thus the forms they take in the Dark World are extremely significant. Toriel turns into a queen, and Undyne turns into a knight who gains a very familiar power, glowing blue spears. Sans, though he hasn't yet appeared in a Dark World, is a character who appears in both Deltarune and Undertale and has massive mysteries surrounding him in both. A secret room in the latter reveals he has a mysterious machine covered with a tarp, and in a drawer beside it lies a photo of 3 unfamiliar people, under which words are written. Don't forget. In Chapter 4, after returning from the Church Dark World right before the only required encounter with his character, we can hear a familiar chord. The place where it rained begins to play, a track directly connected to its raining somewhere else, from his most emotionally resonant scene in Undertale's pacifist route. On Deltarune's official website, the first phrase you see following the title proclaims, "The next adventure in the Undertale series has appeared. Dive into the parallel story to Undertale." To be parallel is to exist directly alongside something, but never meet with it. To have the same exact distance between the two of you until the end of perceivable time. Deltarune is not a sequel to Undertale, but it is a conversation with it. Back to Chris and Asriel's room. Asriel is the poster child of Undertale. Chris is the lead character of Deltarune, and thus this imagery, their disparate sides of the room, feels extremely evocative. The fact that characters from Undertale take on their Undertale forms and powers in the Dark Worlds, places which are literalizations of fiction as a concept, only adds to this significance. And of course, with the fact that Sans is quite likely the Sans from Undertale, who somehow transports to that parallel universe, it feels like Deltarune is constantly referencing Undertale in ways meant to be read specifically by fans of the former. So much so, in fact, that a popular theory which has remained since Chapter 2 is that Deltarune is taking the areas of Undertale and playing them out in reverse. And yet, you are by no means required to play Undertale to appreciate and be impacted by Deltarune. So I believe Deltarune is doing something different. It's living up to its title, an anagram of Undertale. Anagrams take all the letters of a certain word or phrase and change them around to create something new, an act we see happen over and over again in the meta-narrative of Deltarune. One of the game's most important songs is titled Don't Forget. Its lyrics a plea from the singer to remember their existence, and yet, we only ever hear this version once, at the end of the first chapter. The next 2 chapters replace it with a remix, the singer's voice faded into the background, looping and repeating what they once sang clearly. And finally in Chapter 4, an entirely different song has taken its place. But in the church, they sing a hymn, one which sounds oddly familiar to Don't Forget and ends with the phrase, "Pray we not forget the tale of Deltarune." Later on, when this church becomes a dark world, the final piano puzzle needed to proceed requires Chris to play a rendition of this hymn. But theirs sounds different, including far more elements of Don't Forget than the hymn we heard earlier did. And this isn't even the first time they've played this specific interpretation. Earlier in the chapter, if you stayed around and listened to them play the piano in the holiday house, you would hear it as the last song they played before stopping. This parallels what the hymn is about in the first place, the prophecy. The prophecy has constantly been iterated upon over and over again in the world of Deltarune, with books like Lord of the Hammer inspiring games like Dragon Blazers, inspiring people who've never been exposed to or simply don't remember the prophecy to be impacted by it without ever knowing its original context. That core, that overarching understanding, is emotional resonance. At the core of the prophecy, Lord of the Hammer and Dragon Blazers is their ability to emotionally resonate with those that perceive them, as is the same with Don't Forget, the hymn, and Chris's interpretation. That's what makes Deltarune so powerful. Its ability to take all these elements of Undertale, give them an entirely different context, and yet have them be just as emotionally resonant. All creation is inherently inspired. Whether consciously or subconsciously, the art that shapes us also shapes our art. Deltarune is taking from more than just Undertale, just as Undertale did. It's inspired by games like Earthbound and Chrono Trigger, and a whole host of stories that have existed years upon years before it was even conceived of. But that doesn't lessen its worth or its impact. It's taking all of these elements and making something original that is just as emotionally resonant as all its predecessors in its own unique way. I opened this video with a quote that I felt was particularly topical. It is the first of a few interesting quotes you can hear from certain shuttas in Chapter 3's TV world, and this one in particular brought to my mind Deltarune's relationship with its predecessor. In the once upon a time, there was a land like purple cliffs, a frozen waste, watery basin, a metal desert. But this theater was built upon that, and it grew. Not everyone liked the change. Some people left. Of course, that was in the days of the black and white. Deltarune is extremely self-aware. It knows how it has changed, how it has built itself atop of Undertale, and how not everyone is happy about it. But for those who've decided to stick around, it strives to tell its story, in spite of the challenges and in the face of staggering expectations, because it knows that it will find a place in certain people's hearts. And for those people, it will resonate with them in ways which all the art that came before it never could. Thanks for watching.